Alrighty. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here and for making space for this conversation. My name is Jessica Mofield, but you can call me JMO. I am the Vice President of Policy and Community Engagement here at the Center for Police and Equity. And I'm grateful to have the honor to kick things off with what I believe will be a really rich and meaningful conversation for you all. But before we dive in into building what we need, lessons from elected leaders on community-centered safety, I just have a quick uh, rundown of housekeeping items so that our time together can be seamless and also where you can definitely tap in and contribute to the conversation. And so for the purposes of this conversation, everyone except our speakers will remain muted throughout the conversation, but this is very much still a dialogue. You can drop questions into the Q&A box at any point. We'll save them for the space we're holding later in the session. So please don't be shy. Make your voice heard in the space. Also, I know what you're thinking. Will there be a recording? Yes, there will be. And so every attendee will receive a link to the recording and other resources from the CPE team, allowing you to revisit or share this conversation with others. And when this is all said and done, we'd be really, really grateful if you can fill out a short survey that will appear in the chat at the end. It only takes a minute, and your feedback won't just disappear into the ether. It'll definitely be used to shape how we build and refine spaces like this in the future. So welcome, welcome. We also want to just lean in to why we're here today. And the main reason is because we're asking really difficult questions about what it means to build a world that loves us back. What does it take to move the needle toward true community-centered safety? We all know from being comrades in this work that it's generational. And if it were as simple as policy memos and pilot programs, life would be a lot easier for all of us. But we do know that it's about the courage to continue generational work and support leaders every day that come together to disrupt old ways of thinking and build alternatives rooted in care and belonging. And so this year, through our Asked Elected Champion listening sessions and the survey work that we've done, we've been talking to local electeds about the hard stuff that's been happening this year and in this political climate, also about how we pilot public health based approaches in their communities, how they are navigating and grappling with very real challenges of shifting power and resources in the spaces they hold, and also how do we carve out and hold space for the approaches that honor and uplift the wisdom of those who have most been impacted by traditional policing. And so today we're super excited to be sharing those lessons with you, the themes, the breakthroughs, and also the setbacks, because we know that when it comes to unlocking democracy, it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's created by the ability to be nourished and self-determined. And so throughout this conversation, we'll be unpacking what that means. And there's been three kind of big threads that we've been focusing on. And one will be what's working to sustain this work. Two, what's in the way and how can we move through barriers around sustainability. And three, where can we find the power with you for deeper collaboration and impact. And so all of this framing happens within the framework of Unlocking Democracy, one of CPE's programmatic hubs for advancing community-centered safety. Of course, we don't do this work alone. We do it with fabulous people and in partnership with the Council of State Governments Justice Center. And so this initiative offers learning communities and working groups that provide technical assistance on crisis response, community violence intervention, substance use, and HBCU behavioral health crisis response. And so through this community, we're creating spaces to deepen connection and also offer actionable steps to move from theory to reality. And so all of this work is rooted in the simple belief that government can and must be of, by, and for the people always, which we recently just saw in New York's primary elections, which I'm really excited about. But also it rests on mutual trust and shared responsibility. And so sending a lot of love and gratitude for all the people in the space that do this work with us, for showing up, not just for this conversation, but every day for the people and places where you live. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Ciaran and our amazing speakers to get started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, JMO, for the warm welcome and for setting the vibes. Hello, everyone. My name is Ciaran Edmondson, and I am a Policy Research Associate here at the Center for Policing Equity. I want to thank you all for being here today as we discuss how we can better support elected leaders looking to stand up and scale community-centered safety strategies. For the spring 2025 cohort of the Elected Leaders Council, we decided to take a bit of a different approach. Rather than bringing elected leaders together to learn from us, we thought it would be best to take a step back to learn from them. In order to do this, we hosted 3 listening sessions and sent out an online survey that was filled out by elected leaders across the country. These questions asked about the challenges they were facing, what's working well, and where there are opportunities for additional support, technical assistance from us and other leaders in the field. Before we hop into the panel, I'm really excited to share our findings with you. And if we can move along to the next slide. One more slide, please. Oh, another one. Thank you. So, really excited to hop into our findings. You can use the QR code on the screen or the link that will be dropped in the chat to view the resource that we developed that basically compiles all of the insights that we gained from elected leaders. And just excited to jump into this conversation. Next slide, please.
Alexa, stop.
So, the first thing that we saw that was working well was government programs really thinking critically about where to house their community-centered safety programs. We know that jurisdictions have house programs in numerous places, whether that be existing departments like public safety, public health, emergency medical services, or the police. We've also seen newly created community safety or crisis response departments. In addition, we've seen nonprofits that serve as the lead entity in collaboration with the city. So there's a lot of different options, but what we know is that community safety programs require a lot of coordination, a lot of community engagement, and a lot of collaboration. And so thinking critically about what government entity has the resources and the capacity to best provide oversight to these programs is really essential. So I just spoke to the need for collaboration in this work, and that's something that our elected leaders also pointed to as something that was working well. We know that this work cannot exist in a silo, and that our elected leaders spoke to the value of the collaborations they have with both traditional first responders and also community-based organizations, and how these collaborations really expanded their reach, their impact, and also the potential for funding opportunities. So next we'll go into building early and ongoing support through messaging. Our elected leaders said that, community trust and support is really foundational and really drives their programs. In fact, most of the programs and the elected leaders that we spoke to really noted how community voice was essential in even getting these programs to where they are and getting started. And so having that public education about why and how community responder programs work and how they serve the community is really essential to building that community trust and buy-in early on. Next slide, please. So we'll quickly just point to some examples of a few of the points that our elected leaders brought up in terms of what's working well. First, we'd like to point to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and their community safety department. In 2022, Cambridge established their community safety department in response to resident concerns and then also a city council policy order. This community safety department houses their care team, which is a team of community responders that respond to behavioral health incidents outside of the police, and has really just served as a great example of, building what you need, essentially, realizing that there wasn't a government entity that was set up or suitable to house this program, and so taking the time to think critically and build a new department to support the work. Next, I want to highlight Olympia, Washington's Familiar Faces program. This serves as a great example of cross-agency collaboration. Familiar Faces, their police department has integrated behavioral health specialists and outreach specialists into their police department, and it shows how impactful collaborations between traditional first responders and alternative first responders can be. Next slide, please. And I'm going through our findings kind of quickly, but again, we really encourage you to use the resource to kind of go deeper through what we heard and found from our elected leaders. So now we'll touch on challenges. So one challenge that we heard consistently was dispatch coordination. Programs had a lot of issues setting up dispatch, figuring out how to route calls and how to organize their systems. This is one of the most technically challenging aspects of implementation because dispatch coordination requires extensive training for dispatchers, and it also requires a lot of conversation. But we know that dispatch coordination is critical because it allows the right response to be given at the appropriate time, and it helps prevent delays in responses. Next, we have strengthening data and evaluation. We know that strong data and evaluation practices are critical for maintaining buy-in, receiving funding, and then also setting program goals and priorities. Many programs struggle with knowing what data to collect, how to measure the data, or even just face capacity challenges that prevent them from undergoing robust evaluations. And next, we have political will and public trust. We know and we have seen that shifts in administration, transitions in political leadership can destabilize programs, especially if new leaders come in. And we know that sustained investment in community champions are necessary to sustain and help this work thrive. And finding those community champions is something that our elected leaders really noted that they were struggling with. Next slide, please. So next, in terms of challenges, we have addressing workforce strategies. There is a nationwide shortage of behavioral health professionals, which limits the impact and reach of community responder programs. And so that we know that competitive wages and equitable staffing models are necessary to address this shortage. And this is something that our elected leaders noted as something that's really limited their program's ability to take off and grow. And then last, we have securing sustainable funding, which is something that every elected leader spoke about. Many programs rely on short-term grants, and it's not sustainable, and a lot of jurisdictions are facing budget constraints. And when tough decisions about budgets and where funds should go happen, community safety programs are often the target for cuts and are left vulnerable. Next slide, please. So a few other examples we want to highlight that speak to some of the challenges that we just went through. First, we're going to start with the Albuquerque Community Safety Department. This community department has done a really great job with dispatch and routing their non-violent, non-emergency behavioral health related calls. They have set specific call types, assigned priority levels to really ensure that the right responder is able to show up for the community and to avoid delayed response times. So I definitely recommend using the resource to learn a little bit more about the work of the Albuquerque Community Safety Team. So in terms of good data and evaluation practices, which we know is essential, we would like to highlight Chicago Care. The Chicago Care did a pilot evaluation in collaboration with the Chicago Health Lab, and this evaluation really laid the groundwork for their future evaluations, helped them identify challenges and areas for program improvement. So again, really recommend using the resource to learn more about the Chicago Care pilot and ways that programs can best speak to their impact. Next slide, please. All right, so now that we've quickly gone over our findings, we're going to move into our panel discussion where our amazing speakers are going to speak to their insights from their respective experience on how to best support elected leaders in some of the challenges that they noted they were facing. So we talked about, sustaining buy-in, messaging, data and evaluation, and our speakers are going to discuss all of those things today. So with us today, we have Brian Tashman, Deputy Director at Vera Action. We have Councilmember Yasmin Imani McMorrin from Culver City. We have Gantry Fox, Director of Operations at Salvation and Social Justice. And last but not least, we have Raquel Romans Henry, Policy Director at Salvation and Social Justice. I want to first just thank you all for being here and for being so willing to share your insights and experiences with us. I'm going to start the first question by giving you all a brief opportunity to introduce yourselves. Each of you brings such a unique lens to this work, and so I'm wondering if you can each briefly tell us about your role and your path into the field. And I will start with you, Brian, because I'm going to ask you the next question first.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Brian Tashman, Deputy Director of Vera Action. Vera Action is an arm of the Vera Institute of Justice that focuses on advocacy. And what we really try to do is tackle the politics of crime and safety. So by winning the debate, we can move and advance the policies that we know bring about safe and more just communities. So really excited for this discussion. At Vera Action, we really specialize in that messaging research, opinion research. So super excited to talk to you all about it. And then we'll also just share that on our other side of the Vera Institute, that's where we really focus on those policies, coming up with those comprehensive safety and crime prevention plans. So thrilled to be here. I've been doing this type of advocacy work for many years now, groups like the ACLU, People for the American Way. So before I joined Vera, I focused a lot on our detention system and what types of reforms and changes we can bring about to make folks' lives better. So thanks again for having me.
Awesome. Councilmember McMorrin, we'll move on to you next.
Awesome. Well, it's still morning for me here. So good morning or good afternoon, depending on where folks are. I'm so grateful to be in this space with esteemed colleagues. So grateful to CPE for convening and continuing to pour into this issue. My name is Yasmin Imani McMorrin. I use she, her pronouns. I am calling in from Culver City, California, which is on the west side of Los Angeles. There's a lot happening in Los Angeles right now. Hope to lift that up in some of my discussion points, but I am the first Black woman to be elected in Culver City's history. Culver City used to be a sundown town. There's a lot of disproportionality, both historically and present day, in terms of our data and how our police interact with our Black and Brown communities. So looking forward to diving into this conversation today. And again, just really grateful to be in this space, innovating and problem solving for all of us. Thanks.
Gantry, we'll move on to you next.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Gantry Fox, Director of Operations with Salvation and Social Justice. And at Salvation Social Justice, we are truly focused on liberating those voices that go unheard through policy with a theological, faith-rooted framing and basis. We do organizing. We also do policy. And so for me as a director of operations, my hands are in a little bit of everything, driving the mission through the business and how it's done, policy, procedure, and ensuring that our executive director, Dr. Reverend Charles Boyer, that his vision runs the way it should run. I have been an activist of sorts since high school, but that not being my professional area. My professional area is in criminal justice. And I worked as a director of police accountability, as a contractor for Salvation and Social Justice for several years before coming on full time and helping Dr. Boyer get our business off the ground. So it's a pleasure to be with you all here today, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you for that. Raquel, we'll move on to you.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, and it's so good to be on with all of you. It's an honor and a privilege. My colleague Gantry laid out the vision of the organization, if you will, or the mission of the organization. I'll just say that from my perspective, I have the honor to serve as the director of policy. I had the distinct pleasure to help on the drafting of key legislation and leading the campaign around the advocacy that would support community-led crisis response teams throughout the state. And I come to the work really with 20 plus years of grassroots organizing experience, 15 years in big G government, and still I'm moved by the fact that I'm still a student in so many regards in the work. I'm really humbled by that, and it's probably the most exciting component of the work is working alongside people like yourselves and learning something new every day. So it's an honor to be here.
Thank you all so much. Really appreciate that. So Brian, my first question is for you. As we talked about in our findings, a lot of local elected leaders are struggling with narratives on public safety right now. And I know that you've done a lot of polling work with voters. And so can you speak to the messaging strategies that work?
Absolutely. As I mentioned here at Vera Action, we've done over 30 rounds of message testing, opinion research, things like focus groups, ad tests. And what we've really found is that it's really important to lead with safety as a shared value, that empathy is really key, even more than data. So we have really tried to break this down into safety, accountability, and justice. And by emphasizing these three themes, you're moving the debate away from what's so common. It's who's tough on crime versus who's soft on crime, who's for law and order, who's for defund. That's a debate that is not really what voters want. They really want to hear, first of all, that you think safety matters. What do we do to prevent crime before it happens? That means investing in things like affordable housing, good schools, healthcare access does a lot to also, we also need to do a lot more to treat mental health and respond to mental health crisis, treat drug addiction, and also focus those resources on solving the most serious cases. So trained professionals can have response to things like mental health crisis by sending the right first responder. So leading with that value of safety matters, and safety meaning we're going to try to prevent crime before it happens. But accountability matters too. To a lot of voters, they always say we want to make sure that accountability is still there, but that means accountability at all levels, right? So that means we can hold people accountable, they violate the law, but it also means we can hold our system accountable when it fails to create safer communities or when it does things that are unjust, illegal, or unfair. And frankly, we can also hold public officials accountable, right? When they spend billions on things that don't work or support programs that lead to abuse support, different laws that we know only will send us backwards. So accountability at all levels really matters. And then, of course, justice matters. It's such a false choice that we can either have safety or justice. People want to have and deserve to have both. So we can support police who put their lives on the line for us every day, and also have accountability if there are cases where they abuse their power or break the law. People really don't want to have to choose between safety or justice. They don't want to have that debate of who's soft on crime, who's tough on crime. They want to know that folks value safety, accountability, and justice, and are leading with those values.
Thank you so much for that answer. I really appreciated just you stating that safety is a shared value, and we have to lead with empathy, and use data to complement that empathy, but not let one supersede the other. So I really appreciate that. So next I am going to move to you, Gantry, and I am going to ask, how are you, through Salvation and Social Justice, using language that builds trust, especially with people that have been historically harmed by public safety systems?
Yes, thank you for that question. We really use African restorative justice principles and language to build trust with our communities. Um, in essence, African approaches to restorative justice prioritize repairing harm, restoring relationships, reintegrating individuals back into their community, um, reflecting a really deep commitment to the community well-being, and the interconnectedness of the lives in the community. Um, that being said, those things are broken down into kind of several different categories. How we look at it, one would be community focused. And so we're very community focused because we center two worlds, one being the directly impacted and the other being faith leaders. But speaking about directly impacted right now, what we do is we center them as experts on the given subject matter from their lived experience point of view. Whatever area that's in, for us, it could be violence intervention, it could be substance use, or it could be mental health. And our makeup and the demographic of our team are those that are returning citizens. We probably have one person on our team, two people on our team that's not, but have been indirectly impacted by those issues. And they all are from the city of Trenton, which is where we are centered, right? And so there's that communal focus, right? So everybody that works on those teams are from there, and are returning citizens who have now rededicated their lives to turning them around and wanting to pour back into the community what they took from the community in the past. Another area, some of you may have heard the term Ubuntu. So that particular philosophy, right? I am what I am because of who we all are, right? It's still that communal piece, which emphasizes that interconnectedness of humanity and the belief that one's humanity is directly tied to the humanity of others. So using that language, demonstrating that language, reconciliation and healing is another component, right? That empathy piece that Brian talked about, where here we're looking directly to try to help heal the wounds caused by personal trauma and experiences, sensitive issues, trauma-informed language, strength-based language. And lastly, but of course not least important, the last component is role of community leader, right? And so in African societies, they often rely on community leaders, elders in the church, chiefs, to settle disputes and mediate disputes, administer justice, and the like. For us, we center the faith leader to be the voice leading the charge, leading the movement and the things that we want to change. leading these community-led response models in your own churches, in your own places of worship, getting out policy priorities that touch these particular areas, using that faith leader, right? They have the moral authority and they have the wisdom, and there's a cultural connection and respect from our community for those that are clergy. Even if we don't attend church, we still seem to have this connectivity and respect for them. And so at Salvation and Social Justice, that role of the community leader for us is the faith leaders, and we provide technical assistance for them to be able to do programs and to be able to have conversations, to meet with Raquel and her team at legislative hearings, and really be the voice. So all this language touches culturally our community. It builds trust because these people are from where they're from. They've gone through what they've gone through, and they have a language, quite frankly, some of us may not have for that particular community.
Thank you for that answer. I want to give you, Raquel, space to kind of respond to that, but I want to ask you a kind of different question that takes a little bit of a shift. This centering empathy when we're thinking about public safety and this communal language that Gantry was talking about, it is a shift in what we've seen about how people traditionally think and speak of public safety. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, what has been the hardest narrative to shift within your work at Salvation and Social Justice? And what have you kind of tried? How have you tried to like move the narrative and shift it in a way that favors empathy and community?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think Gantry nailed it. I would say in response directly to the issue, the question around narratives. And am I cutting in and out because my connection isn't the greatest here? You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, apologies. So with regards to narrative shifts, I think there are really two narratives, right? So on one hand, when you are working to advocate for community-led solutions in the legislature or among department agencies, there's always the question of, well, can they handle it? Can the community handle it? What's going to happen if things get really bad? Like who's going to be responsible, this and the third? So one of the things that we're constantly reminding these people are these lawmakers, these state actors is that, listen, for years, for decades, the critique of our community has been, well, why don't they clean up their own house? Why don't they do this? Why don't they take action? And what we're saying is that not only are we prepared to do that now? We've been doing that. And what we're saying is that the state needs to really, what we're asking from the state is not permission to continue doing that important work that we've been doing unassisted for so long, but for the state to really put their money where their mouth is and make sound investments in order to support that work. So that's the one narrative. Then the other narrative that's probably really challenging is this narrative of indifference within communities oftentimes. It's this idea that it doesn't matter what we do, how many times we assemble at the State House, how many phone calls we make to lawmakers, whether or not we vote, the machine is just too great and we can't stop it, right? And what we have to do is we have to work to show people that the very reason they don't engage in the process, whatever that process may be, is the very reason that they should. And more than that, we need to constantly be connecting the dots for communities. Oftentimes what we find is that policy is presented as something separate from what's happening on the ground. And what we really need to do, and what I'm proud to say we do very well at SNSJ, is we are constantly working to connect policy to pavement. And that really starts with taking a holistic approach to the work. So we have our street team that leads violence interruption and crisis response work, but we're not merely connecting with people around their trials and their tribulations. We're making sure that we are working and we're having conversations around civics and making sure that communities understand what's happening in the city, that what's happening in the county and at the State House is impacting their daily lives, and why. community-led alternatives are so important. So, you know, at the risk of sounding like a 90s after-school special, I think a large part of what we do is reminding communities that they can and that they are the difference, right? They can make and they are the difference. You know, really reminding communities that, you know, Goliath can and will fall. But that's only going to really happen through collective work and cooperation. And then we have to make sure that we're providing the consistent support and the resources to really mobilize and activate the community's agency.
Thank you a lot. I love that framing of, you know, we're not asking for permission, we're asking for investment, and that's great. So we're gonna shift gears a little bit, and I'm gonna shift to you, Councilmember McMorrin, and I am going to ask, what's one local program or policy that you've seen truly shift the narrative or outcomes on safety in your community in Culver City?
Absolutely. I've been really enjoying everyone's responses, so super excited to be here again. But as it pertains to Culver City, and just to share also, I'm originally from New Jersey. I moved out here, and yes, I moved out here in 2016 with my daughter. Politics was not my plan. I joined the PTA, and that's sort of all she wrote. Got me involved in budgets and advocacy and all the things, and here I am, right? And Culver City has a really, I think most cities though, but like there's almost like this monopoly of police and safety. Like they go, you cannot have one without the other. So 2020, when I initially got elected, I just got reelected this past November. But when I first got elected, you know, it was a different time. I always say, remember back when folks were willing to have this conversation about examining and being honest about the actual impacts of policing on everyone, not just some folks, right? And so that gave us an opportunity to really, you know, we hired all these consultants. At that time, I was just a community advocate, but, you know, hired consultants to evaluate the efficacy of the police department, evaluate opportunities to really invest in community and opportunities to, you know, find new ways to provide safety. And so with this recommendation from this consultant, we embarked upon, you know, allocated funding, which I was really excited about because budgets are value statements. We allocated money in 2021 to explore what a mental health, because our consultant had found that I think 70% of our police calls were for unhoused neighbors or mental health. 70%. So with that, it let us know that, oh, does someone with a gun need to come and respond to our unhoused neighbors or people having mental health concerns? Probably not. And most people agree with that. So at any rate, it took a while, but last year when I was mayor, we finally launched our mobile crisis team, which was a 5-member team. Now our team is expanding with this budget. Really excited about that. It was initially just from 10 to 6, now 10 to 6 Monday through Friday. Now we are moving to Monday through Sunday, 10 to 10. Very excited about things happening in Culver City. But with that, like, it's great. Like, we're getting good feedback. The calls are working. They're doing the referrals. They're doing the interventions. And just to be honest in this space, because, you know, it's like people see that, this is another form, this is another tool in our toolbox, right? So there is a sort of a retrenchment happening as well, that like, oh, police are like, well, we need to come to all of the calls just to make sure that folks are safe, right? So it doesn't really become like a savings, right? So I didn't know that that was the case, but I found out literally in a council meeting on Monday that it is the practice. It wasn't the policy, but it is the practice for police to come out, which was not our intention. So we're going to have to revisit that. And they're moving a little more into supporting our unhoused neighbors, which is great because they need support, but we really want it to be for everyone as well. So, you know, you just got to continue to ensure that there's not mission drift in our programs. But at the end of the day, like, this is kind of unprecedented. So I'm really proud of it. And like, you know, majority white town, that we have this investment, that it is possible, that we can expand on it, and that it is having the intended outcomes that we wanted. So, and to know, like, it's still, you still have to measure things, and it's really hard right now to get data from our police department. So we're working on that too, because we want to make sure that we're measuring across departments and measuring efficacy there as well. But I'm excited. Like, you got to celebrate the wins, big and small. And this department was created out of nothing, and now we're seeing it expand. So it's a good thing, and so I'm excited to continue moving into like the complete toolbox of what investing in public safety looks like. Thanks for the question.
Of course, yeah. Congratulations on the program expansion. That is huge and what we want to see happening everywhere. So, really appreciate you sharing that. So my next question is for everyone, and we've been talking a lot about, narrative shifts, messaging, how to win that. So I'm curious on how you all have used data, both qualitative and quantitative, to make the case for community-centered safety. And I will start with you, Brian.
Sure, absolutely. We, here always really like to test different ads that folks are running. And something that we found from our ad test, which I'll get into more detail, was that, as I said at the beginning, data is persuasive, but relying on empathy, coupling that with data is way more persuasive. Telling those like first person stories, talking about the record you did together is really, really important. So when we did some ad testing with focus groups, we had one focus group, white voters, another Black voters, Latino voters, and we played 3 ads. One was sort of like a middle of the road elected official or candidate for office, I should say, who talked about their work, and that's brought crime rates down because they supported the police. Very much like standard boilerplate what you hear from a lot of politicians. I backed the blue, crime went down. Didn't really say any personal stories, really just did a traditional message around crime and policing. The second ad was probably what you might see come one of the big elections like last year, very lurid imagery, crime is out of control, everything's a mess, scenes of violence. We can only bring crime down by getting tough on crime. And then the third ad we tested was from a candidate who was mayor and talked about how crime was down 20% in his city. And a huge reason for that was he was building rec centers, investing in after school programs, the youth programs at baseball fields, basketball courts. And they interviewed in this 2 young people talking about how these after school programs changed their lives, and people understood, and these focus groups connecting after school programs, rec centers to crime is falling. So that message, which really coupled again these stories of young people who were able to get new opportunities because the mayor made investments backed by a track record, that is what really sealed the deal. So all 3 focus groups really liked that ad over the 2 others, the more traditional one and the more sort of like political, lurid, tough on crime ad. So I think that really just showed that, yes, having data is good, but having data with folks who can actually talk about the success of their programs for them personally is even better.
Awesome. Thank you. Gantry, we'll turn to you next.
Thank you. Yes. So we know when we are being funded that funders want to be able to see where those dollars are going and how that money is being managed and what the impact on the community is. And so at SNSJ, we're very proud of being able to partner with Microsoft and partnering with them to create a CRM. And so now we have a CRM, probably for the past 2 years, where our response teams are able to document, case manage their cases when they're dispatched, what's going on, the follow-up, the strategy, the next action items, where people have been referred to, where they have not been referred to, what are the challenges, and communicate that way as well. And for us, it's been so impactful. And the ways that we use to promote it, right? Besides the report that we do every month to our funder, right? Supporting the work and how impactful the work is. It also has supported our strategies. We're able to place our teams in the areas where gun violence is the highest in the city for our street teams, where substance use and overdose is the highest for our crisis response teams. And being able to extract that data and continue to work together on the leadership levels to strategize the way we help impact our community. But more poignantly, we have a bi-weekly meeting, citywide stakeholders meeting. And in that meeting, you have community members in that meeting, the Office of Attorney General, the local police, healthcare administrators, grassroots organizations, the county prosecutor's office is in that meeting. Several of our partners and our restorative justice hub work within the city is in that meeting, and our community-led response teams are in that meeting. And once a quarter, we report out on both the qualitative and the quantitative data from our street teams. And we measure different type cases like conflict resolution cases. We have, the fights and so on and so forth in the schools. We have a safe passage team that addresses that. And then we have our community conflicts. How many of those have we mediated? Where are we on those? And then your typical measures, your gun violence homicides that we reported to, gun violence shooting that occurred, overdose, known mental health, suicide. So we report out on those things. I think we also have a stabbing a measurement. We report out on those things in front of all of these stakeholders, right? So they understand what we're seeing from the boots on the ground, right? As credible messengers in the community and how we're dealing with those things. And then from a quantitative standpoint, we're sharing the narratives of some of those most significant data that was just shared, that qualitative data, right? We're doing storytelling so that it really impacts those that are in the room and they understand what's transpiring. We're giving summaries of our community events and activities that show support and the cohesion of the community and unity. And then we report out and share that impact and from our mental health community. We have different groups, like some of them are barbershop talks, some of them are salon talks, some of them we call the huddle, where they can come together and get support and process through grief and things of the like. And all those things that I've talked about briefly, coupled with the report outs from the local police department, right? And the hospitals and the health administrator reports helps us all to strategize together in ways that we can help impact these different areas and these different issues. And now it was said that there's challenges, right? Yasmin brought it up, right? What information and data are those willing to share, right? And so it took us at least 10 months, 10 to 12 months to come to an agreement on the very bare minimum. That more importantly, more specifically, the police department wanted to share, right? And so relationship is everything, right? And so being able to build those relationships, a little bit of trust here leads to a lot of trust down the way. And so that's kind of what we do. And we strategize together. Hey, these are the projects. You know, the street team has the projects. You know, the street team is responding to certain things. And though we may not give names and we may not give who's affiliated with who, we will give you where we are with that. If you see reduction in crime and violence, that's what we ultimately want. The goal is not to lock up everyone. The goal should be, right, and from a public health perspective, right, is to help everyone, to infuse hope and change in everyone, and so that we don't have this continuously.
Thank you, Gantry, for that answer. I especially appreciate you talking to the role of collaboration and data sharing, and using both qualitative and quantitative data. So I really appreciate that. Raquel, I'll move to you and ask, how are you using both qualitative and quantitative data to make the case for community-centered safety?
Yeah, I think Gantry laid it out really well, in particular as it pertains to how we use qualitative and quantitative data um, uh, to secure support from funders. I think from where I sit on the policy end, it becomes incredibly important that data really just to justify continued state funding, right? Even if you have a policy win, this state investment game is an ongoing one, right? So you're constantly trying to secure investments and then make sure that those investments are basically proportional to the changes that are taking place in the state and that they're increasing them as they need to. So for example, around our work with the community-led crisis response team, right now, with the changes that have been happening at the federal level, many of our teams across the state are facing significant federal cuts. So in addition to making budgetary asks to support the program beyond the pilot of the 3-year pilot, there are asks that that the state expand those investments and make sure that that money is coming from cannabis revenue or opioid fund revenue as a way to ensure that our teams are not facing the challenges of, well, where are we going to find the money from? And as we're making those budgetary asks, we're leaning on the data to show, listen, over the course of these many years, these are the results we've seen. But also, I'll add that in my experience, you can have all the numbers in the world and policymakers will still say, so, like, who cares what Pew's research says? Who cares what, the ACLU or what Vera or New Jersey Policy Perspective is saying? And so it becomes incredibly important that, to Brian's point, that you have the qualitative data, that you are getting the voices and the testimonies of people who are experiencing it on the ground, and not just merely documenting it, but also bringing them into those hearing rooms and making sure that lawmakers are hearing from them directly. And I think that's part of the work that I enjoy probably the most is really working with community members to craft those testimonies and really connecting the dots between the data and what's happening to them in a real way, and then using all of that to continue to justify and continue state support.
Awesome, thank you. And last but not least, Councilmember McMorrin, I'll turn to you.
Asking about the data piece?
Yes,
Okay.
using qualitative and quantitative data.
Yeah, absolutely. Both super valuable. Absolutely. There's one of these quotes that stuck out to me and I'm blanking on who did it, so forgive me, but it's like the purpose of a system is what it does. And I think that data allows us to kind of see what our systems do. And I think it's great because it allows us to also use that as information and course correct. Like, we're not trees. Cool thing about local government is like we can be a little bit more nimble than maybe the state and maybe even the county. So we were like, our ears are on the ground. So we're trying to figure out like, how do we best support, how do we best, provide the basic needs of a city? Yes. And how can we also make sure that we are are, supporting our folks? How are we thinking about our children? How are we thinking about our elders? And how are we making sure that, we're living into these values that we say that we have? And so since I've been at the city, I'm very proud. Like we now have a dashboard for our homelessness work. Our housing stuff is like every month they update that in terms of like where we are with our housing element and our plans and our development. So like I'm a big data girly, and making sure that like we're sharing that with the public, not just that we have it, but like that anyone can like say go to culvercity.org and access like where we are and understand where we are with the mini plans that we have. And so I'm hopeful. I think the storytelling piece that, this is ironic, but we just hired like a comms person like 2 years ago, which I think, but whatever, we have it now. But like that storytelling piece and amplifying like the impact of the things that we are doing are really, really important because it humanizes, like right now, sorry, I'm about to deviate, but right now we're like in this, we've decided we have a progressive council 3-2 vote. So our progressive leadership, which I'm a part of, decided to support an affordable housing project with money, right? Because we have underinvested over decades. We were exclusionary as a sundown town. We did not allow folks who are not white to buy in our community. And so I feel like we have an obligation not only to further fair housing, but to make sure that we are supporting capital A, deed restricted affordable housing. Some of our neighbors don't like this. They feel like because, we're in a difficult budget time that we should not be supporting affordable housing right now. And so I feel like whether it's this or whether it's police or investing in programs like our mobile crisis and that expansion, right? These are opportunities for us to truly live into the values that we have indicated and really to show that impact with the data. Right. So I think it's twofold because you have to not only do the work, but uplift the uplift the story around it, make sure that folks are seeing the impact because, our community is going to grow. We're going to welcome more neighbors, which I'm excited about. But we really want to make sure that, again, that we're delivering a high quality of city service for everyone. And when we're not, that we are course correcting, doing the pilots and, just doing our best to support everyone. So yeah, love, love, love data.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, humanizing data is extremely important. And like you said, not just doing the work, but telling a story to go along with it. So I really appreciate that. So my next question, and I'm only going to ask one more so we can have enough space to jump into our questions from the audience because we've got a few good ones that have come in. So I want to ask you all, from this work, from doing our listening sessions, we learned that elected leaders need more support to carry this work forward. And so I'm curious from all of your perspectives, how can support from nonprofits, researchers, philanthropists, communities, advocates in the space, how can that support strengthen this work? And I will start with you, Brian.
Sure. I mean, one thing that we've often seen time and time again is just, as soon as the campaign is over, sometimes people leave, but, the work doesn't stop, right? If you're in office and probably know that already, that, the media is still there, your constituents are still there counting on you, other politicians. So it's really important to stay involved, not just during election year or the 3 months before a vote, but really to make sure we have like a 365, view of how to support, our friends and partners. Something of your action that we always, really try to do is to make sure that when you do, have bold, visionary platforms, when you try to change the way people are thinking about it, try something new, we know that the backlash comes. We know that often people are really disturbed by change and they try to gin up fear, cause people to, feel a certain way about programs, misrepresent what you're trying to do. So we've really tried to create playbooks for folks to use on how to fight back against backlash, how to neutralize some of the most common attacks that you face, and really try to work to understand how to defeat some of these really, awful attacks, not just try to avoid them, not just try to duck from them or change the conversation, but to really go head on. And often it's through continuing to own a really affirmative agenda on safety. So here at Vera Action, we always try to partner with folks, not just in election year, but throughout the year, throughout the years, I should say, and in the good times and the bad, right? So when the going gets tough, we want to be there with y'all, and continue to really see how we can get these concrete solutions, things that work, and to make them reality.
Thank you for that. And we will go to you next, Raquel, to speak to how additional support from players in the field can help.
Yeah, I think I'll just say really quickly. I mean, I think, we need support from entities that, whether it be nonprofits, researchers, philanthropists. I'll speak specifically, to funders. I think support that is really prepared to take its cues from those who are leading the work from the ground. If that means, providing multi-year funding sources that aren't really restricted by these rigid kind of guidelines. Sometimes that means making sure that there's flexibility in the funding structure, whether that means leaving room for revised strategies or extending time periods or what have you. And then also really, again, speaking to the funding supports, I know that oftentimes, although we like collaboration and we love cooperative work, there are times where, funders want to do coalition funding, right? They want to support coalitions. And I think really being honest about the inherent challenges within funding coalitions, that you're bringing a group of people together who may, have very different ideas of how to move the work, and then kind of forcing them to work for funds. I think there are inherent problems with that sort of structure. And then I think also in terms of support, one of the biggest needs I think is around comms, really helping to move the narrative beyond our geographical location. I know for New Jersey, we sit right between Philly and New York. And so what that means for us is that oftentimes our news gets drowned out with what's happening in those two areas. So I think, in terms of supports from nonprofits or philanthropists, really lending their communication resources to really advance the work and advance the messaging, because as we see media continue to shrink in our area, I think it becomes more and more challenging to really compete with what's out there and get the news of the work out there as well. So I think just in terms of support, I think those are some areas that we could really afford to see more of.
Awesome. Councilmember McMorrin, I'll turn to you for your perspective as an elected leader. What support do you need?
Yeah, well, we don't have time for that long list today, but in terms of just the work, I do remember like initially getting elected, everybody's so excited, and then you're right, folks say, okay, bye, good luck with that. And I really encourage folks to please stay engaged, because we do have community members, at least in Culver City, I can only speak to that, but we have community members who show up a lot and they're like, this pothole or this need or whatever, and they're like squeaky wheels, like that saying is a thing for a reason. And it's typically just some people who typically have a lot of their needs met that end up being the squeaky wheel. So my thing is like, we should all have that kind of energy when it comes to any level of government, because we are servants, we are public servants to support you all. So I would really encourage you to come out and let us know when things aren't working well. Let us know when things are working well. Also, sometimes we don't get enough of those feedbacks, whether it's an email or a public comment, because it's always good to just know, like, thank you, like this is something, this is the impact that it had. And it also might help with some of that storytelling that we were lifting up before. I also, I am an elected, but I sometimes think that we're here for a good time, not a long time. So like sometimes it's like just having the political will to like get the things done, and and there's like the balance of wanting to be reelected and all, but I think we should be encouraged in this moment. What just happened in New York City is fantastic. Like I'm just like, yes, good people get elected and do good things. Like we should all like, it is possible. I say all the time, more than the status quo is possible. And like these bright glimmer, I mean, there's a lot of gloom and doom. There's a lot of fights right now. Flooding the zone is flooding the zoning. That's what I've been saying. And it's crappy, but it's effective. And we're all feeling despair. But we have to lead into the hope. We have to continue to do the work. Best practices are really helpful. So that's why I love this space and amplifying like the things that are happening in other jurisdictions that are going well. And it's like, oh, what can we borrow from there? Because we know not every community is like the exact same, but we can like borrow and share. And so like I love a good best practice. And validators, that's what I wrote in my little note. Like little validators, like having folks who can like say like, oh, like similar to a best practice, but like having people who are willing to say, oh yes, I love this, or yes, this is actually working out well for us. Because sometimes it's like I'm the only person of color, only woman on my council, and sometimes people are like, oh well, that's just Yasmin, right? So if there are folks who can say, leaders, professors, teachers, sometimes children, right, like who can say like this would be helpful also, you know. So having that mobilization, strategic advocacy is always helpful to like help us get the work done. But at the end of the day, like just got to count your votes, and you know we got to vote in all of our elections, because it is I know, you know, it's not the only thing. Got to vote and get in the paint and get in the street and do all the things. But yeah, so that's what I would say. Like, whatever your piece is, we don't have to do all of the things, but like, we have to do something. So, like, whatever your piece is, if you're on the public comments, if you're on the emails, if you're talking to your neighbors about the things that are going on, because I think that fear, especially in this moment, is so like it's so salient. It works to keep things to preserve the status quo and to make people feel like, oh well, we can't do anything differently, or this is the way we've always done it. You're always trying to rock the boat. And yes, I am, because I'm a part of a community who is not always centered, whose needs are not always met. So I feel like I am in this role to like shake it up and to expand like the who is being centered in our community. Um I want us to, you know, there's a lot of gloom and there's also a lot of hope. So let's focus on that. Let's be the light in these dark places where we're doing this really, really meaningful work. And yeah. Thanks. Hopefully I answered that.
Yes, no, thank you so much for that answer. Gantry, I'll turn to you last just for your thoughts on where additional support is needed for your community as you carry out the work.
Sure. I'll keep it short for the sake of time. I see we're a little pressed here. I'll piggyback off of my colleague in terms of funding. And the only thing I'll say here, if philanthropists who truly want to promote the welfare and to save the lives of the most impacted by these issues, gun violence, mental health, and substance misuse, are needed now more than ever, given this administration change and the funding cuts. So it's critically important for philanthropy not to just hold on to dollars for the largest organizations, to be able to say they gave this large lump sum, right, to this one organization or this company, but to the grassroots organizations who are boots on the ground and who doing the work every day, just like Raquel mentioned. Because this allows for them to diversify that portfolio, right? When you're a small organization and you're a grassroots organization, your portfolio sometimes is very dependent on one or two funding sources. And ultimately, you're one bad move or one poor relationship or one extinct relationship away from not being in business any longer. So I would definitely, implore philanthropists to look at it that way and also donate those dollars to the smaller organizations.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. We will now move into some Q&A, and we are a little short on time, so we're only going to have time to answer a few questions, but please feel free. We'll share our contact information at the end, so please feel free to reach out with any other questions, and I will be sure to share them with our panelists. So the first question came in for you, Salvation and Social Justice team. They're curious about the app and the CRM system that was developed with Microsoft. And they were curious if you're using a particular app to do your analyses, or did Microsoft help you build something unique that is kind of just for you all?
Yes, it was something unique. Um, just for us, we were able to um, contract with them, and then we also had contracted with a project management team. And together they came together and built something unique, for us. Really did a deep dive in our program, deep dive with operations, the workflow, what our intentions were, diving into our grant measurables, so that they can make sure that it's reflected in the system, as well as near and dear to my heart, our CQI, our quality indicators and measures, our KPIs of our organization and of our programs, direct service programs, to see what measures were there that also would be reflected in the system. We had numerous interviews with the team around things to try to make it user friendly as possible. And so long answer to for a short answer, which is very unique for us. And Microsoft, if anyone's out there, Microsoft does offer grants to support. At least they were last year as well. Our grant was secured roughly 3 years ago to support nonprofits who are doing work such as ours. So I would encourage you to do a little research and see what they're doing in 2025.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Quickly gonna ask another question. Have you all seen examples of public agencies sharing power or decision making with community groups in a meaningful way? And what made it work, if so? And this question is open to anyone who feels compelled to answer. No, no examples. All right, we will just shimmy on to the next question. This question is for you, Councilmember McMorrin. Given the current political climate in LA, how has this environment affected your ability, for better or for worse, to implement alternative safety strategies in your district?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's horrible, right? National Guard being present, ICE literally snatching people, like they run into places, they're masked, like it's cruel, depraved, all the things. It's touched us here in Culver City. Ice cream man who had been here for 20 years was just snatched from the street on Monday. Car washes, it's depraved. So I want to acknowledge that because these are real folks. They're not, they said that they're going into people's jobs, into their homes, into schools. Like this is terror. This is state sponsored terror, which if we look at our history, we're very familiar with that in this country. But in terms of like, as it pertains to alternative strategies in my district or in the city, because we don't have districts, we're all at large, all five of us. But I think that this is one of those moments where it's opening up the collective's eyes to like the interconnectedness of these carceral systems, how we treat folks who are in carceral systems, who are incarcerated, the conditions that have been horrible for a very long time, but now because so I think it's, even though it's all super horrible, it's like an interesting moment because people are like, and then in Monday's council meeting, I was like, oh, well, can we, parents have been reaching out. I'm a mom also, and there's summer programs, and it's like, how can we make sure that staff that are in charge of children particularly, but just staff in general, know what to do if like ICE comes in, or any federal agency comes into, spaces. And my city manager and I ended up putting this clip online because it's always an interesting exchange with sometimes with me and city staff. And he's like, well, staff knows that they are not to interfere with federal agents. Like that was his response to me. And I'm like, well, thanks for that. But what I'm asking is if we are training staff to be prepared because we know that this is happening in West LA. We know it's happening in Culver City. So how are we being prepared? And then it was like, well, that would have to be a discussion that we have, right? And then we got this influx of community, which is why community input, comments, and all those things matter, because we got over 200 emails, which is a lot for us, about this issue and folks asking for the city to do something. And magically, an email comes out this morning that says, oh, well, we are giving information to staff and then we are doing, and it's not what people are. People are asking for rapid response. They're asking for mutual aid. They're asking for these things that we can do. COVID also showed us that like the government can give us money. The government can respond and meet our needs in the ways that we don't always outside of certain situations. So I think this moment is giving us an opportunity to really support all of us because we know that they're not just snatching immigrants. And even if they were, we need to care about, and I'm the daughter of an immigrant also, we need to care about the condition. Due process matters. Like we cannot be just kicking that out because we have a new president who's high on his supplies. Forgive me, but I'm just, we need to remember that we have to take care of one another. And this is reminding, I think, also like people are just setting up numbers, right? Where Churla and like other nonprofits are like just expanding to meet this moment because local government is like slow or other spaces are slow. So I am hoping that we really can rise to meet this moment. It's bigger than a statement. It's bigger than a protest, although all of those things are helpful. So, it's a wild time. I'm really tired. I'm only 36, but I have lived through more unprecedented times than I care to, than I have cared to. I'm tired of the unprecedented time. But it's really beautiful to see community members showing up for one another in this season and really connecting and imagining, because I think that our conditions sometimes prevent us from dreaming beyond the current circumstances. So I think this moment is like, okay, what could local government be doing? Or what could we have and how could we support one another? So I'm excited by the community building and activations that are happening, even though it's like such a crap reason. And there's no reason for it because, folks are literally just trying to live their lives. So yeah, I don't know if that answered all of it, but hopefully that, there's a lot happening. Y'all pray for us, please.
No, thank you for answering that, and for leaving us with, crazy things are happening. These are the times we're living in, but there is hope, and this really is a moment for us to reconvene, and dream about what our systems can and should look like. So I appreciate that. We are going to cut Q&A and close us out because I don't want to keep anyone over time. And so if we could get the slides back up and I will quickly kind of close us out. Awesome. Thank you so much. So this report, our Spring 2025 ELC Reflections, is the findings that I was sharing earlier about the insights that we compiled from elected leaders. So again, just encourage you all to take a look at this. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. We'll share our contact information shortly. I'm not sure if this QR code was working because I know the other one was maybe a little janky, but I think the link was dropped in the chat. And if anyone didn't get it, please just let us know in the chat. Next slide, please. So also want to point you all towards our policy resources. We have the following white papers that you can view using the QR code. And really just invite you all to look at this. It has best practices, examples from different jurisdictions on program models, best policy options. So really just encourage you all to take a look at our policy resources. Next slide, please. And we have a lot of community engagement resources. As we've talked about through this conversation, having engaged community members, having community champions is really essential. And there's lots of amazing ways that community members can engage in this work, no matter, where you're starting at. If you've been engaged, if you're just getting started, everyone has a place in this work. So really just encourage you all to also check out our community engagement resources and share them. Next slide. So I know that we had to really quickly breeze through our Q&A. the panel was amazing, as we expected. So they shared so many great insights that it was hard to cut the discussion, but I know you guys had other questions. So please feel free to either use our ELC email or my personal email to share any questions that you have that didn't get answered. I will be sure, if I can't answer them myself, to route them to our amazing panelists. And yeah, we'd love to continue the conversation. It doesn't stop here. There's more work to be done, and we'll be taking all of the information that we learned back to think about, how we can support, what resources and what spaces we need to better support the work. So just want to thank everyone so much for being here today. Want to extend gratitude to all of our panelists just for being here, for being so willing to share. Just really appreciate your time and energy. And yeah, let's keep doing the work. Thank you, everyone.